Well, hey, everybody. Did you get a notification, brother, that we're recording?
Yes.
Okay, good. We're having words today with my longtime brother and friend, John Elgin Brown. John's an amazing guy, man. I was thinking of how to kind of categorize you in this introduction because there are going to be people here that don't know you. And what I came up with is that you are a pioneer, a pastor, a presbyter, and in my life, you've been a prophet repeatedly. And I know that's true of many people. I could just speak very specifically in my life. And I want people to get to know you, man.
Works for me.
So talk to me. Let's kind of start. When I say longtime friend, I can trace us back to early 1980s.
Yes.
When you were and I say you're a pioneer because you were pioneering in the Christian radio world at that time. That's where I met you.
Absolutely.
And you and Tim, wasn't Tim? Who was your partner there?
Tim Doyle.
Jim Doyle, yeah. And
he's ordained out of this place, by the way.
And doing a really cool work in St. Joseph, Missouri, downtown.
Yes.
What went down, left the burbs and the big suburb church and went downtown and bought a building right in the core of downtown St. Joe, where the unreached are. All the churches have moved to the burbs, and is doing he's a dynamic guy, man. But you guys were doing Christian radio in St. Joe, Missouri, and Jimmy Bratcher and Kenny Price and I were unction.
Yeah.
And you played our recordings on air. Well, that was a big deal to us, but
us too.
that was big stuff for us, man. But we've been friends long enough for a whole people to come out of Egypt and get into the promised land, man. Over 40 years. Think about that, man.
A lot of sand.
and manna and a lot of mountains walked around, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think we're doing on that, man? Are we progressing?
It depends on what your measuring stick is, I think.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But the interesting part for me, I ran into someone 2 or 3 days ago, and they asked me if what I was doing. I mentioned I was going to do this podcast with you, and they said, I ought to know him. I said, yeah, you know him because you know Jimmy. And he goes, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that happens every once in a while. And it's just interesting the way the Lord, pinpoints. Like you've seen a big map in a sales office or something like that, where they have an office, they have a pinhead,
Yeah.
And the Lord just puts little pins in the life map that we have. And so don't ever throw them away, because you don't know when you need to return to that spot. Or they're going to show up here where you are.
Jimmy and I met at Crescent Lake Church at a youth lock-in. Gary Rennie was pastor then, and he had invited me. He said, come bring your guitar and play some music through lock-in. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I'm getting out of the car. Gary came out, and he kind of, came out, and I'm getting out of the car, and he said, man, Jimmy Bratcher's here. And I said, who's Jimmy Bratcher? And he said, well, he's a guitar player too. And I thought, great, this is going to be some guy with a gut string that plays Blowing in the Wind, right?
Yeah.
And we clicked that night, and we never stopped clicking. We played together a long time. And Jimmy wrote a lot of good stuff in those days. I wasn't writing then, but he was writing a lot of good stuff, and is out doing it profoundly today. So yeah, these things all fit together, bro. I mean,
they did, don't they?
Yeah, and you guys, you and Tim were pioneering that effort, and then both of you went out into pastorship, and you've been pastor at Harmony Vineyard for over 30 years, haven't you?
That's correct. Yeah, I sure have. It's like I've got them fooled, and so as long as they keep paying me, I'm here.
And you only have to work a couple days a week, right? Yes. I mean, isn't that how the whole pastor thing works?
Yeah, it's like it's a part-time job. You just have to decide which 12 hours of the day you want to work.
Yeah, Harmony's a beautiful church. I mean, you again been involved there musically, played on your platform, and I
Yeah.
remember coming over with the gang from Crescent Lake and playing in a yard event on a hot Saturday once, for
Yeah, we
example.
did.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Very hot.
uh, my electronics quit working. It was that hot.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, it was hot. I presume it was weather. I don't think my licks were that hot. Maybe they were. Maybe I should go that direction with it.
You know, what's really interesting, you brought up Tim and James Harris, that was an elder here for me, and then my executive pastor for a few years.
Yeah.
And James has been in Alabama working
Right.
on food desert projects.
Yep.
And he will be here, well, next week, speaking for me in the afternoon, and in the morning, the evening, he's going to be up in St. Joe with Tim, because Tim and his group are trying to plant a food desert grocery store in that part of town where there isn't anything. And because we're hooked up together, and he's got hooked up with James. James is trying to do that kind of nationally. And so really just, you don't know why. I tell people all the time, I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there, or I'm going to do this. And I said, that's good. Always remember, the most important thing you're going to do when you're there is make relationships. And it's the relationships that 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years from now, you go, so that's why I was there, or one of the reasons I was there. And so I just think it's wonderful the way the Lord, the Bible says that light is sown like seed for the righteous, and gladness. But light is sown like seedness for the righteous of heart. And so when you sow seeds, some of it's radishes and it pops up like that, and some of it's oak trees, and you don't think it's ever coming, but he knows. And so light being sown like seed mean when you're connecting with him, trying to obey him, trying to walk with him, and seeds are being sown, light's going to pop when you least expect it, perhaps, and it's going to shine. Oh, that's how I got here, and this is why I'm here. I love that. And you can't, because the gestation period of light, when it pops up from seed form, is all sovereignly done, so if you're walking the walk with him, you can just count on light's going to spring up. And of course, the thing you have to train people in is that you need light because it's dark. So it doesn't mean you're not going to have a bumble and a stumble in there somewhere, but the light pops up because he's divinely appointed it to do in that way for that purpose in that season. So anyway,
the book says the steps of the righteous are ordered of the Lord, and in the BIV version, even when he stumbles, you bring up James. I met James through a completely non-related environment. From knowing he was involved with you. I met him through a client who worked out with him at the Y, North Kansas City Y, and through that guy, and through James, I met Glenn Scheib. Who eventually introduced me to the man that I'm in a business with today, and have been in business with for 17 years. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know, but you are right. What we do know is that the seeds planted by the Lord grow, and they bear fruit.
Yes.
They bear fruit in amazing ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say this about what Tim's doing, because I think it's beautiful, and what James has been doing. The book doesn't say I was needing a worship service or a Sunday school class and you held it. It said I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was hungry and you fed me.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great gospel tunes of our generation is the Doobie Brothers taking it to the street. When you find out what the street needs, what Jesus did. Jesus got out on the street and he found out what the street needed, and he ministered to that, because that's where it was. That's where it is. And that's a beautiful thing, man. So you tell me, and before we turn on recording, you guys are selling your building. What's the plan?
Well, we're not sure.
That's good.
It felt like we got really, and this is a, second verse, same as the first story. COVID just about wiped us out. We lost probably like 60% of our population, financially and numerically. And we haven't really totally, fully recovered from that as much as we would like. Consequently, you end up having to put more money into the property than you into the people. We don't like that.
Yeah.
And so it's essentially a cash flow deal. If we could get rearranged in that, we could do more of the taking it to the street stuff. So that's pretty much where it is.
Paul Bergman, whose name might pop up if you look back at the history of the Chiefs, because he played for him back in the 80s, went out to Ojai, California, and started a little church 30 years ago, 35 years ago. Pastored it. It grew. They got a great facility, got it going and rocking and rolling. And one day about 10 years ago, he went to a board meeting and he said, "What are we doing?" He said, "We own the building, but it needs a $50,000 roof. It has a light bill. It has a." He said, "What if we sold this building, put the money in a trust fund that would fund street ministry? What would happen if we did that?" And the board was on board with him, and they sold the building, put the money in a fund, sold it to a school, by the way, who came to them after the sale and said, "Oh, by the way, we don't need this building on Sunday. You can use it anytime you want to." Yeah, and but they have taken that ministry to the street. Paul gets up mornings in his old high mileage Isuzu Trooper and goes out looking for guys flying banners on the street, and stops and gives them cold water or a sleeping bag or a tent or any variety of things. He's free of the building. I sat on a call the other day, and I remember this happening. There's a great little work that started down in Westport, in the Westport Coffee House Theater. And it was rocking and rolling, man. Grateful Save played there. A lot of people did. It was really a movement. They were really touching a lot of people. And somebody gave them a building, and it wiped them out. There is ample warm, dry space that would love to have a gathering of your people on a regular basis on a Sunday.
I keep telling myself that.
That's absolutely true. I can give you multiple examples. You are on target, and that does not surprise me in you. You've always been a guy who was never afraid to question the status quo. I remember, this will be an example of a time that you prophesied to me. I remember sitting in your office one day out back, and I may have mistaken the metal building for your youth center. Out back, there were concrete trucks lined up on the 47th Street, and you guys were pouring concrete for a building for youth that you were building outside. And I was kind of asking some questions because I've gone to you for counsel more than you know. And I said, "What's going on?" And you said to me, "If we don't get this Jesus thing right, it's all going to fall down like a house of cards."
Yeah, I remember saying that, actually.
I've quoted that many times, and it's true. It's not about the institution, brother.
No.
It's about the organism.
Mm-hmm.
And you put enough concrete on top of a plant, it's hard for it to grow. It'll find a crack and grow, but Jesus was not burdened by dragging a multi-million-dollar building around behind him.
Now we're supposed to, how to say it. Well, we're Americans. Everybody wants their own home, and so that's the mentality. I don't know that that's wicked or evil. It's just cultural reality. And so I've always said it this way: we got to have some place to meet. We have to be together somehow, and we call Harmony a healing place. And so I said, we need people in here getting healed so they can go out there doing healed. I've tried to say it this way. So listen, if we don't really have it cooking in here, then we're not going to make it out there, because there's got to be a place. You fall in love with a girl, you want to bring home and meet your parents. I said, the best thing I've got to give is my family. And that's my church family, my nuclear family. I got to have a place for them to be. I want to have a place I can bring people to where it's different. Everybody knows your name type of place, that kind of thing. And so I think I'm not against buildings, but I'd rather the buildings serve us than us serve the building. That's all, and
Interesting, where everybody knows your name was a bar. And
cheers.
I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. And probably the most profound ministry I've been involved in my life was the 5 years that every Monday night at 7 o'clock I was at McCoy's in Westport.
I remember that.
No Bible, no agenda. I just showed up, and I have no idea how many Facebook friends that I'm still in connection with that I met there. I have people come on that I don't even remember and say, "Hey, do you remember when you did this or you did that?" Well, I didn't do it. The Holy Spirit did it.
Right.
I was just there. But yeah, the Lord will provide you a place, man. He always has. And you've always been open. You've always been open for the next story, for the next miracle. That
Yeah.
I mean, you like me have live a storied life. And I was on a call the other day, and we were talking about epiphany, and somebody said, "Well, have any of you ever had an epiphany?" And I said, "I've had so many that I think I'm probably an Episcopalian." My life's driven by it, but I see it in your life too. I in speaking of taking it to the street, Crescent Lake, when we attended there, had a fire. You'll remember that
Oh
20
yeah.
plus years ago.
Mm.
Had a fire, and one weekend, and we were having like 4 services a weekend: Saturday night and Sunday morning and And pastor had to go out of town on business, and he had you come in to fill the slot.
Yeah.
And he said, "Would you take John out to dinner Saturday night afterwards?" I said, "Absolutely, love to do that." And I called ahead. There's a great barbecue place in Excelsior Springs, Wabash. And they had a little side room, and I called and said, "Look, I've got a small party coming in on Saturday night about 8 o'clock. Could we reserve that?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we'll set that aside for you, Mr. Engel." And we show up about 8 o'clock on Saturday night, and this young woman who I'm absolutely positive was a single mother of 2 or 3 that was working 2 or 3 jobs to make it. Yep.
3 kids.
Yep. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "I'm really sorry. Whoever made that reservation for you didn't remember that we don't reserve the room on Saturday nights. And best I can do is put a couple of tables together for you." Now, here is a waitress on a busy Saturday night.
Yeah.
And she's theoretically disappointing a customer. But we said, "That's fine." We sat down and we ate. And I remember the bill was about $60. And I handed her my debit card. She walked away, and the Lord just profoundly spoke to me and said, "Tip her in cash."
Yeah.
And the only cash I had on me was a $20 bill. But it was a clear directive as far as I was concerned. So she comes back and gives us ticket, and I signed it, and I handed her the 20, and I said, "And this is for you." And you pulled a 10 out and threw it on the table and said, "I'll see your 20 and raise you 10. And she walked away from the table, and I said, "Bro, you didn't have to do that." And you said, "Yes, I did." You said servers really don't like waiting on people that pray for over their food, because too often what they get for a tip is a gospel tract.
That's right.
And you said, if we're children of the Almighty, we need to leave our trace behind. It's our DNA. We need to leave our DNA. But as a matter of fact, you said, as a matter of fact, I have a teaching on the DNA of God. And I said, "Brother, I don't know what you plan to preach tomorrow, but I know what you need to preach now." And you did. Let's talk about that. Was revelationary to me. That was profound to me, and it's influenced my entire walk since then. Talk about the DNA of God, brother.
But when you look at it, and unfortunately, lots of people think that God is like the cosmic boogeyman. He's up there with this big fly swatter, and he's ready to pop you every time you make a mistake. And that's not what it says. And so you go back to Moses, and talking to the Lord, and I'm not going to go if you don't go with me, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, let me see your face, let me see your glory. And he says, you can't do that. And then all of a sudden, boom, here the Lord passes in front of him. And the first thing he says, God, your God, the mighty God. And he says that he's giving, he's generous, he's kind, and lists all of those things, those attributes. And when you think, if this is God on God, this is what God says about God, Exodus 33. And I said, and we don't know that. And other people aren't ever going to know that if we aren't kind and generous and loving and forgiving and all those things. And so it was easy for me the next day. I was going to do it. But that's so significant because it's funny. I was thinking last night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, just kind of laying there for a second. And I thought, what are we going to talk about tomorrow? And I thought, well, I don't know that I know what we're going to talk about. But I heard myself saying something like this to you, Bob, is that one of the biggest problems is that if you find God other than he is, that's how you'll think he is. You must find God the way he is. Because if not, you can start your boat on a good course, but if you just get a degree or two off, pretty soon, you're in Cuba instead of in North Dakota. That's just how it happens. And so we have to find him the way he is. And the way we find him the way he is to find out how he describes himself. And of course, part of that is here's Jesus. He's the exact representation,
Exactly.
Of the Father. In these last days, he's spoken to us through his Son. But those explanations of who he is wipe out everybody's miscalculations. Misinformation and disinformation is one of the enemy's biggest tricks. And so I've found that if I can find what he says about him, I'll go with that. And it's the same thing when we're trying to establish our own identity. I can't tell you how many times I had to make myself look me in the mirror and say, Brown, and I'd read the passage. This is what he says is true about you. You going with that or what you think? And I literally had to make the choice. I don't look like that. I don't act like that. I'd love to be that way. I don't think I am that way, but you say that that's true about me. So I am the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus because you say so. And I will choose that even though I mess up and act and speak at times like I am not. Sorry.
I wonder how often great, man. I wonder how often we think we messed up when we didn't.
Oh, because we have the wrong measuring stick.
Exact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flo did a teaching. She's not a person that gets in front of a crowd and talks, but she got put in a position where she needed to give a teaching many years ago, and she got a cross-cut piece of oak, and started talking about how you can identify the years of that tree by the rings in it. The thick rings are wet years, the thin rings are dry years. This particular piece that had at some point somebody hit it with an axe or something, there was kind of a chink out of it. All those things, and she talked about all those things, and then she said, but what gives oak its beauty is its rings. It's not symmetrically perfect. It's quite imperfect symmetrically. And yet in our household, if it's wood, it's going to be oak. We love it. And interestingly enough, a little side, mission oak. That's Freudian, but I'll go back to the steps of the righteous are ordered of the Lord, even when he stumbles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Lord knows we're going to stumble because he put goodness and mercy watching our back to make sure we don't fall down when we do.
That's right.
And go ahead.
Well, I said that's why sometimes when people need an adjustment, they need to peer into their rearview mirror to recognize it's goodness and mercy that's behind them.
Yes.
So they don't have to worry what's ahead of them.
Goodness and mercy, God's got your back, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, goodness and mercy follow you. Yeah. So critical that we understand who we are in the big picture, who we really are.
Oh, identity is, well, I was being interviewed one time. strange situation. I was doing the local TBN television programs, and I was like the MC guy, interviewing people, and I knew the manager from my radio days, and could you do this, and would I do it? And I walked in, found out, believe it or not, I was actually pretty good at it. I mean, I found it simple. It was like radio with cameras,
Yeah.
And this guy from Baltimore in town was here to do some kind of something or other, and found out about it. And anyway, they said, "Hey, could you interview the guy?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I showed up to do the program. And a lot of times I would show up and never have met the people I was interviewing. And that's how you can pray without ceasing. That's how you learn to do that. It's when you have to do stuff like that. And he said, we're on air. And pastor friend of mine who knew the man was with him. And he said, "Pastor here says that you know God." And I said, yeah, I do. He said, "Okay, describe God in a sentence." And I said, "That's easy." And then I thought, what in the world am I going to say? Because I didn't know. And I said, I had a t-shirt made out of this, actually. I said, "God is a giver and a forgiver. And if you're going to convince people that you're like him, you must be too."
Amen.
And he just looked at me. He said, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, I don't know. It's the first time I've heard it that way, so I don't really know." But then he ended up writing a column about it and stuff like that. But you've got to know that that's what he's like. If it's ever going to be what you're like, you have to know that those things are. And so 119 Psalm, I'm there doing another one of these television programs, and the main person that they were wanting me to interview hadn't shown up yet. And this one was live. A lot of times it's recorded. This had to be live for whatever was going on nationally and all that kind of stuff. And so at about 2 minutes till, they come on and say, "That guy's just called. He's not going to get her, and certainly not in the next hour. So you got to speak for the next 35 minutes. And I had like 90 seconds, And so I got up and spoke a little something I'd been using, quite a bit. At 119 Psalm verse 68, it says, "You are good and you do good. Teach me your statutes." And I said, here's what I think the Lord's trying to say. Until you nail it, know that you know that you know that he is good and he does good. There are ways that you're unteachable. Once you can establish his goodness and his goodness to you, he's not just good, he's good to you. He is good and he does good. Now you're open to being teachable in ways you never have been. And you're going to find out things about you and about him, because teach me your statutes. And I just took off on that. And that's become a bell ringer. That was probably 20 years ago. But that's really real. If you don't know those things, that'll get tested so big that you'll either think it's you that's being good, or you think it's him that's not being, because circumstances are dictating the situation. And that's not true. He really is good. It doesn't matter what circumstances look good. And he really does good. Even when you can't. I say it this way, people: all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I said, all things work together for good. And when you realize, this is another really good little thing, that God is sovereign, which means he's also sovereign over timing. That's so hard to permit him to be sovereign over the timing of things, not just the truth of things, but the timing of things. And so I was standing up doing this, behind the pulpit saying, all things work together for good. Because when time is involved, it's like good is spelled G-O-O-O-O-O-O. And there's a lot of goo before you get to the good. And that's experientially real. So you got to know who he is, and you have to know who he is in you, who you are in him. So I stole the pulpit there for a minute, but that is so significant. If you don't have that, you're going to buckle, man. I mean, and then you're going to fall. The Bible says, wisdom is build her house, hewn out these 7 pillars. Later on, it says, a wise man falls, but even if he falls 7 times, he pulls himself up, because there's already been something established by the wisdom of God to pull yourself back up on. You got to have that stuff.
By the way, you own the pulpit here. You take it all you want, man. Very interesting. The seven pillars, and he pulls himself up. That that would be the eighth time. Eight is the number of new beginnings.
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that I never saw that before,
yeah.
but
That's cool.
but there's always a new beginning, bro. There's always a new beginning. There's always, and I wrote a blog some time back called "The Wealth of the Prodigal."
Hmm.
See, what I see is a number of things. First of all, it says he went to his father and asked for his inheritance, and he took it out and he spent it lavishly, squandered it, is what it says in the King James. But if you look the word squander up, it means to spend lavishly.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we've been taught that's very nice. The guy goes out and he pours out all his wealth on people. Now, he apparently partied with them. He did all kinds of stuff, but he pours out all his wealth, and it comes to the end of that. And it comes to a very ultimately shame-filled end of here he is in the, slopping hogs, right? For
Yeah.
the Hebrew kid, right? And he says, it's better in my father's house than this, man. I got to go back. I got to go back to my father's house. And he goes back, and I love it. The old man sees him afar off. The old man runs out and hugs him. The old man says, bring the fatted calf. Wasn't a fatted calf. Everybody knew that calf been waiting for a while. The old man knew the boy was coming back, right? But then instead of rebuking him, he gave him a robe, which is his covering. I endorse this boy. He gave him a ring, which is authority.
Yeah.
And he gave him sandals, which means he could go back out on the street. The older brother didn't get it. The older brother is saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? I'd love to know what the prodigal did later. We don't know. We're not told. But I'm convinced what he did. The old man put his arm around this boy and said, you know what? I'm giving you a robe and a ring and sandals because I want you to go back out where you were and tell him that you don't lose your father, the love of your father out there, man. And unlike your older brother who stayed on the farm, you've got street cred.
Yeah.
They know you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jimmy's classic example of a guy that was really running the other way. Jimmy can walk into to maximum security, can walk into death row at a prison and talk to him, and he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And they know he knows what he's talking about. All that to say this, all things work together for good.
Yeah. Oh, they do.
Yeah. Steve played for Charlie Sharp over at his farm over on the east side of the state several times, and I was there one time for a couple of days because we were playing a series of stuff over there, and they took me out on a tour of the farm. It was the largest contiguous farm in the state of Missouri at that time, and among other things, they had 3,000 head of cattle.
Oh, wow.
And we're driving around, and they drive me into this big area that looks like about 3 football fields that have been concreted over. With on 3 sides, there's about 12 or 14-foot walls. Then there's one end of it that's open, and we drive in the open. I said, "What is this?" And they said, "It's a silage pit."
Wow.
And they told me what size it was. And at lunch, I'm with the foreman, and at lunch, the consultant head that I have starts doing numbers, and I finally turned to him and it said, "Man, it based on the size of that thing, you could have," and it was thousands and thousands of cubic feet of silage that I quoted. And he said, "Well, your numbers are right." And he said, "You're right." But he said, "What you don't know is that we don't just do it up to the level of the walls. We pilot. So it's even greater than that." And I said, "Well, I guess in an operation like this, you just add zeros to everything." And he said, "Yeah, that's right." That night I had a dream. And in that dream, Jesus was standing in front of a grease board like the one behind you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And from right to left, he was making zeros. And each one of those zeros stood for an error in my life, stood for a sin in my life, stood for something that I'd done wrong, stood for the all, went on and on and on until finally I said, Lord, I can't stand it anymore. And he said, look what happens when you put the one in front of this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all those zeros turned into a huge quotient.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Well, we depend upon ourselves a little bit too much, oftentimes at the wrong time, usually. It's that old thing, Bob, about if you've been given a responsibility, you've been given the ability to respond with the response.
Yeah. Amen.
I think placement, that's a really big thing. But if you go back to the prodigal thing, see, the Lord is good and he does good. And if the guy wakes up, the prodigal wakes up and doesn't know that, he doesn't return home. He has to strike that thing and went, oh, it's better there. Why? Because my old man would have kept it rolling. He'd have kept it moving. It'd have been profitable. That is, he's probably still putting money in my bank account,
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so there's this, you have to know him the way he is, because confidence in God on the inside is what permits courage on the outside. And you're not, you need to be bold and be strong. Yeah, and I need to have the bold and strong available to me and aware that that's true about me because it's true about him. And so the more confidence I have in God, the more bold and strength I have out here. This thing's got to be real. That's one of those pillars. You have to know that that's who he is and what he's like.
My mother used to say, you and God are a majority.
Yeah.
And when you know God's got your back, you can be pretty bold.
Right.
Not to be mistaken for arrogant, but you can be pretty bold.
Right.
You can say, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, I give to you freely. In the name of Jesus, get up and walk. And what a mind blower that had to be to say that.
It's like, holy revelation, Batman. I just discovered power. I mean, he didn't know until he stood up and said it.
Yeah.
And when he said it, he said, oh, I like to say it this way. When you say something that's got that tingle on it. When I did this, I used to say, guys, that hot dog's got some mustard on it. You can tell.
Yeah.
There's something on it.
Yeah.
And he stood up, and when he said it, he was speaking truth. He had believed truth, but now he was speaking truth out of the reality of what he believed. And it had the power of truth on it. I suspect that it was a tie between Peter and John and the man who was being prayed for as to who was the most surprised.
No kidding. Yeah. Yeah.
But it started something. But I don't know. I was thinking about this. When I first became a Christian, a long time ago, 1974. So, long time ago. And I was battling about whether or not I was called of God. I was saved in a small Southern Baptist church and had no connection with God whatsoever before that. And people would tell me, you've got the call on you, man. And I said, well, get it off me.
Yeah.
Do I need to gargle with Listerine? And I kept hearing something. And there was an evangelist and a pastor that led me to the Lord. And that pastor, is about 10 months after I got saved, something like that, in the first year. And he was moving out of town. And so I went over to his house, the parsonage, loading up.
Right.
And I said, man, people telling me, they think I'm called of God. I don't know, man. Jesus, that's all I know. That's real. He's true. I'm in. And I was leading people to the Lord and stuff. It was pretty cool, but I didn't have any concept. The life I had lived before told me guys like me don't do things like that. You don't get into the ministry and that kind of thing.
Right.
And, and I'm in a small Baptist church. I don't know that God speaks. I don't know anything. And he said, well, what do you think? Pastors, what do you think? I said, well, I just keep hearing this one thing. And he said, what? And I said, I keep hearing, I want you to call the church up out of the church to be the church. And he said, say that again. I said, well, I think the Lord, just whatever it is I'm hearing, says, I want you to call the church up out of the church to be the church. And he said the funniest thing to me, this is a Baptist pastor. And he said, well, that sounds like the ministry of a prophet. And I wouldn't do that. Those guys don't last very long. I thought, what great encouragement. But I've found that comes up over and over and over. And so that means there's always room for change. There's always room for growth. There's always room for revelation, for understanding and wisdom. And then there's in that little crucible of things, it's that thing where you find out you're wrong sometimes, and it's okay that you had been wrong. That's why you're changing and growing. It's because you're growing into something, and you can't defend that, or pretend that it's not there. It's like, oh, well, good. Well, I'd rather know truth then. Let's do that. And that's been interesting to me.
And the great cloud of witnesses, which I contend, by the way, are everybody you meet. There aren't just those that have passed before us. They're the clerk that checks you out at the grocery store. Everybody either consciously or subconsciously is watching what you do.
Yeah.
And they're quite often going to be much more profoundly influenced by how you handle a mistake than by how you do everything right.
Oh,
because they can relate and they know you can relate. It makes you real, brother.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It makes you real. Yeah.
Well, authenticity can't be faked.
Yeah. No such thing as fake authenticity. A lot of trying, a lot of people trying, but it always finds them out. The truth has this pesky way of not going away. It persists. I referred to you as a member as presbytery, and I want to talk about that a little bit, because you not only have been involved in your own church, but you have been committed to being available, not pushing yourself, but making yourself available to minister to many ministries. Not trying to enlist them, not trying to get them to pay the big up, not trying to dominate them, just be there for them for their sake. And I know of a specific example, and we won't drop names here, but I know of a specific example where a very large, what had been very, very profound church was caught in a death spiral between whose church was it? Was it belong to the board, or did it belong to the pastor? And you were asked with a group of other ministers to go in and try to bring resolution to that situation. And you said something in that room. You told me about something you said that profoundly influenced me. Again, I quote it often. You said, the single mother of three on the 8th row doesn't care what your theology is. She doesn't care who owns this building. She's just looking for a safe place to bring her children and have ministered to. That's the person. When Jesus set off walking, he didn't head toward the institution, he headed toward the fringe. Matter of fact, it's interesting that at his birth, God didn't even bother to tell the institution. He'd been telling them, and they hadn't been listening. So he tells a bunch of stinky shepherds out in the field in the middle of the night and a bunch of heathen astrologers, because they're listening.
Yeah.
How's it working for the church as a whole, brother? You're plugged in Kansas City to a lot of places, and your counsel is received because it's admired. What do you see happening, man, among the charismatic movement in Kansas City?
Well, I had the privilege of getting to know some younger guys here in the last 2 or 3 years at a different level. And I don't know. I mean, that's not everybody, but there's a really good core of people who get it. I mean, guys who get it, and they're not full of themselves. Um, I'll have a story there, but I'm going to bypass, at least for now. But understanding who God is and really valuing what He values and valuing people in the measure that He does. And so I think over the years, I've taught this a million times in our place. So we have 7 values, and the first one is humility. And I think humility is the capacity to place value where God places value, at the level He places value.
Say that again. I want to make sure that
That
humility is.
it's the ability to place value, significance, worth, where God places significance, value, and worth, and be in agreement with that. So consequently, if humility is a genuine gift from God, part of the character that He would build in you via the Holy Spirit, then it's always humility to agree with God. Always. It doesn't matter. When I was in a situation where the Lord kind of told me, so I'm going to promote you. I'm going to put you in a position. And I said, I don't think I'd do that if I were you. And I said, I'm a little disappointed in me at this point. I'm just not so sure that I would do that. I'm a little disillusioned about me. And just quick as a whip, he says, "Oh, I have never for one moment been illusioned about you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
And I said, then he said, "You don't know all I have done and am doing and will do to help you do what I'm calling you to do." And then he said, "It's always humility to agree with me." So I said, "Okay, I'm going to place the value in me that you're placing in me, because you see it and I don't. I don't have to see it. I can agree with you." And it all worked out. I mean, it wasn't like I was going to be president of the United States or anything, but there definitely was a kick up of responsibility, and consequently then a little bit of authority, and that kind of thing. And so when you bump into people that have zeal because they're still young, and they're in that kind of stuff, and passion is not released only to the young. So, I mean, I'm a reasonably passionate person, and young I am not. But this concept of being able to agree with God, placing value where He places value, then it's so much easier to be guided and led, because you don't have to contribute to the civil war going on in you all the time. And, it's like, if I told you that, no, well then don't do it. This isn't hard, And so I think I bumped into several young guys that at least don't have to fight that one. They're in that posture where they're not meek by any stretch of the imagination, but they're not full of themselves, and they seem to have how should I say it? Bible uses the word noble. There's a nobility of heart there where I don't have to be right, but I'm not afraid to say this is what I believe the truth is. That kind of thing, and a real respect, like you would see in a political situation, someone who has just an incredible, solid value on the Constitution and a little bit of knowledge about what it says. That's rare that you find that. I've bumped into a few people, spent a little time with some younger guys who have that respect for the Scriptures and have that nobility of heart to where it's not about them, but they're not shy, but it's not about them. To me, you get that one. Humility is the chief virtue in Scriptures, if you ask me, because if you get that, you're going to get most of the other stuff, because you're going to be agreeing with God and you're going to have the right evaluation of you and Him. And so to me, that's that encourages me. I don't have a lock-in on worship as much as I used to. Part of that is there was a time when the Vineyard Group was kind of whole lot of the new music was coming from, from our portals. That's not happening. Yeah. But I'm encouraged when I find people who worship is, how should I say it, inviting and participatory, but not highly performed. And I worried about that a little bit. Get too much performance in it, and it's close to entertainment, and somewhere in there, that holy reverence type of thing, needs to be. Well, you know what I'm saying. I'm an old rock and roller, so I'm not a prude, in that regard. But I think that's a worshipful heart, where it really is, something really alive between you and God. I love it when you find that in people. Find that a lot when you pray with them. You can kind of, that's not a bad environment to check those things. And those two things help me a lot. So I don't know how broad a spectrum that is, as far as numbers and all that kind of thing. But there's always potholes in every highway, but there's some good patches in this highway, and so that encourages me. I don't know. I don't know if that.
The eyes of the Lord go to and fro throughout the earth, looking to show His strong support to those whose hearts are pure toward Him. Boy, that takes the arrogance out of you, but it empowers you to do a lot of stuff, man. It really does. And there's a young brother who was trying to start a ministry downtown St. Joe 15 years or so ago. One day, I was talking to him. He said, the first time I ever met this young brother, I said to him, man, you got the Spirit of the Lord's all over you. I met him at Word of Life in the coffee shop. But he said to me, man, I don't even have a worship band. And I said, I don't recall Jesus having a lead guitar player, a bass player, and a drummer following him around. I mean, do with what you have.
Yeah.
Don't when Carl Butler was all of a sudden no longer needed on staff, but at the church he was on staff for many years, and because the pastor said, my son's old enough now, so he's going to take your spot. And Carl we were playing music together in the Saved and hanging out a lot, and Carl felt led to start something.
Yeah.
I remember him praying to God, please don't have me start another church on a corner with Sunday school at 10 and services at 11:05, and I shared with him what we had done in afternoons, on Sunday afternoons in the early days of Wells of Joy, and how profound that was when that was working. And I remember we would drive around. His heart was for the bar crowd.
Yeah.
And I said, well, they aren't going to get up on Sunday morning anyway, man. They work late, Saturday night. One thing led to another, and it's pretty miraculous. I got to be on the board of this, but a brother came to him and said, here's a space you can use in the afternoon. But the real thing that happened, the really profound thing that happened, was Frank down at Knuckleheads, which is a biker bar.
Yeah.
Came to us and said, I want to do something. I want to do something in my place. And I've got a little side room and you can have it. And Carl started what was called the Gospel Lounge. I'll never forget, we were there doing it early, and somebody said, Brother Carl, what are you going to do if somebody comes in for the bar and brings a drink into the Gospel Lounge? And Carl said, get them a coaster. I mean, come on, man, we're at a bar. But that became a place where national acts who were coming through to play Knuckleheads would say, hey, could we come in a day early and play this Gospel Lounge thing? Because there wasn't money in it. They wanted to get in that vibe, man. They wanted to feel what was happening there. And people that owned skanky old bars over on 40 Highway would come on Wednesday night and refer to Carl as Pastor Carl, and he visited them in the hospital and prayed over their funerals and married their daughters, and the guy that got it, my favorite parable. Man came down from Jerusalem on the way to Jericho. It's a big decline, by the way. It's 3,000 feet down that trip. And he fell in with thieves, which happens, man. You get out on the road, stuff goes wrong. And we all know the story. They robbed him and stripped him and left him to die in the ditch. And 3 people come along. Now, this is all an answer to a young lawyer trying to figure it out, right? He's asking Jesus. And Jesus had said to him, well, what's the Talmud say? And he said, well, the Talmud says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love your neighbor as yourself. And he said, well, great, you got it. And the guy always has to ask the next question, who's my neighbor? And I'm sure he expected, by the way, that answer to be, well, the guys that play golf with and the guys that live in your gated community and da 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 da. But Jesus tells this parable. Here's this guy in a ditch on a section of road that's known, by the way, for being bloody. And a priest comes by and passes by on the other side. John Maxwell talked about the principle of survival, success, and significance. It applies here. The priest comes by, and he's probably been up to Jerusalem and done the rites, and he's all purified right now. And the last thing he needs to do is touch a body that might be dead, because that'll depurify him, and he'll have to go through the process. He's in survival mode. And then a Levite comes by. A Levite's a man who can keep the law. He's successful. And the Levite comes by and says, well, I mean, what did you expect, brother? You came down here on the road. Your camera's off, by the way, I think, John. Says you got out here on the road, you fell in thieves, and they robbed you and stripped you and left you to die. He passes by. And then a Samaritan. Matter of fact, a certain Samaritan who's on a journey. It's interesting to me that the other 2 guys only passed by, but the Samaritan's actually going somewhere in his life. And he looked on him with compassion. And he ministered to him. We know the story. The point I'm getting to here, I've taken this parable apart a word at a time and talked to the Lord about it. And I got to the segment where it says that after he ministered to him, then he put him on his own beast. And I said one day, tell me about that. What's the deal on him putting him on his own beast? And he said, if you're willing to be significant in my name, you don't have to carry the load.
Oh, that's good.
You've chosen that route as long as I've known you. And a lot of people have been taken to an end and restored. A lot of people, you've been able to take them there and say, restore this, brother. And by the way, if you need any more, I'll be back. I'll cover this. I'm committed to this. Now, I didn't just deliver him to you. I'm committed to him being restored. And a lot of people have been restored by your willingness to say, well, I'm not sure I'm qualified for this, Lord. I mean, see, the Samaritan wasn't qualified at all. What a terrible example. If you were using that, if you were telling that parable now in an American evangelical church, it would be the story of the good gay Muslim. Yeah. I mean, I wrote a blog several years ago, was the Samaritan saved? I mean, we have no history. We've ever attended a synagogue. We have certainly didn't follow the Roman road. I mean, the list goes on. But he's the example. He's the guy who looked on him with compassion. That's the humility of the Lord you're talking about. I can almost see him saying, man, I get where you are. I was born in a ditch.
Yeah.
And wow.
See, I would say always, but I've often equated that just with the brokenness you find people in. And I was talking to a pastor yesterday, and you have the deal where people come and they're all busted up, or you find them and they're all busted up, and you pour into them, encourage them, pray for them, include them, all that kind of stuff. and and then they get better and leave. and I said, well, that's what restoration is, man. I said, I have a little phrase that I use. I tell people, listen, out making promises. Church has a front door and a back door, and they both work, you know. But I said, why don't we do this, especially if these are leaders? Why don't you just come and rest under the shade of our tree and see if the Lord doesn't build you back up, get you strengthened. And then if this is where you belong, Yahoo, we'll get on with it. If not, we can bless you and release you to go back to the thing that you were called to do before you got all busted up. And to me, he said, I'd never heard that language before. I said, well, it's just something I use, but I see that in people. And so we pray about restoring people all the time, but if you're going to be a restorer, you have to recognize you have to be a releaser, because oftentimes people have been sent to you for that purpose. And it doesn't say that the guy that was beat up got well and got back into business and bought a house next door to the Samaritan. I mean, it's just, that's not how it happened. Got released unto what was stolen from him. He got back what was stolen from him, and released back into productivity. And so, and sometimes you don't even know that's what you're doing. This guy you did because it's physical. I mean, you could see it in this story, but the brokenness that's in people, whether it could be they're adults, maybe they had bad upbringing, whatever it is. It's like the devil knows where you keep your goat, and he loves to come and get it. And and you can always tell when it's him, because if you're down and you're getting kicked, that's him. So that's how
I saved used to play a lot out at Ellsworth, at the prison out in Ellsworth, Kansas. And one weekend, chaplain called me and he said, man, would you and Flo come out and spend a weekend? Would you preach on Sunday morning? And, they've got this spiritual life center that private money built right in the middle of that prison yard. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And a couple things happened there. Well, 3 or 4 things happened there that were significant that morning. I walked in and a little early, and the guy that led music there said, Brother Bob, could we play a song for you? The music team, we've worked it up. We'd like to play it for you. And I said, sure. And they played my song Broken to me.
Oh, really?
So I was a puddle starting out, right? But I don't remember what I preached, but I remember before I preached, they had announcements. And one of the things they said is, how many members are we going to lose this week? And 4 or 5 guys held their hands up and everybody clapped.
Oh, wow.
And I remember standing up, how refreshing. I said, how refreshing it is to be in a church who's happy they're sending their members out. See, those guys, at least in the eyes of the law, had been restored.
Yeah.
And spiritually, they'd been restored if they were coming to church, because that's a big statement in prison.
Yes.
And yeah, restoration, man. That's what Jesus came to do. We did it right in the first place. It's got pretty messed up. I can see JB now, man. He looked over the hill one day and he said, wait, here comes my cousin who's gonna show us how it was meant to be done, man. Going to show us the original plan.
Yeah, he knew.
Brother, go ahead.
I think there's an issue there. I mean, it's real quick, but
no, take your time.
For a number of years, I found out when I'm given invitations or appeals or come to the altar or anything like that, I always talk to people who need to turn or to return. I know that sounds very simple, but there was a time where I was mostly after turn, and the idea of returning is because you don't believe in you anymore. And that's really hurtful. I mean, and you can't understand why he would either, but the return issue makes you restorable, if I can say it that way. And then it's like getting saved. The door's on the inside, man. The door to the heart is still on the inside, but to make a way for people to return, it's kind of a spiritual amnesty, where Come on. We'll get this.
Every,
Alibi not required.
every great that I can find in the Word, every one of the men that we look back to or the women that we look back to that really did something went through a valley. The only sermon I ever preached that I choreographed, if you will, that I used visual aids, was asked to preach at Crescent Lake one Sunday. And if you want to hear a lousy sermon, hear one that I've prepared. I mean, the Lord will just give me a word and say,
Go.
stand up the pulpit and speak what I used to always have to listen to the recording later because I wanted to know what I said. You know what I'm talking about. But on this particular Saturday afternoon, the Lord had said, I want you to preach about David and Goliath. And on that Saturday afternoon, he said, by the way, you're going to need 5 smooth stones. And I couldn't find them. I couldn't find anywhere I could buy 5 smooth stones. And I finally ended up on my knees in a creek bed. Now, that's the lowest part of the valley, by the way. And I found these 5 smooth stones. And there's all kinds of theology there. You talk about the water of the word, it made them smooth, and so on and so forth. There's 5 smooth stones, by the way: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the ecclesia, the body, and the man who's willing to be thrown into the situation. But everybody that really did something went through a valley. They ended up on their knees in the lowest part of the valley. You know, Elijah, I wrote a lyric, Elijah was a prophet of the Lord. He called down rain, he called down fire by God's holy word. He burned and slew Baal's prophets, and he never did retire. He got a ride to the other side on a chariot of fire.
Oh, cool.
But in the middle of that, he went off and said, God, I'm done. Just take me.
Yeah.
I've had it.
Yeah.
The list goes on. I mean, you name somebody who we go back and look at as, wow, look what that person did, and I will show you where they went through a valley in the midst of that. In 1988, I had started a little company in my basement, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it was doing good. And then a whole bunch of circumstances came along, and all of a sudden, it was not going to last. And there's a consultant I'd met a year or two earlier at a conference of some kind. He and I had struck it off, and he called me, man. He said, I'm putting together a portfolio, and would you mind writing a letter of recommendation for me? And I said, brother, I'd love to do that, but my business is about to go broke. I'm gonna fold, and you don't want a letter from a guy that's his business went down the tube. And it got quiet for a minute, and he said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but now you're really going to be worth something. He said, my most successful client is on the West Coast, and he won't hire anybody that hasn't experienced a business failure.
Wow.
It's the trees on the edge of the forest that get all the wind and all the rain and all the weather that have the deep roots, man.
Well, I've placed a high value, speaking of David, primarily on resilience, and they're just nobody was better than he was, and nobody was worse than he was. You know, I mean, he was a colossal, profound failure in many ways. But I'll do this real quick.
Take your time.
I was talking with a couple, and they called me emergency thing. You know, their daughter had been caught fooling around with boyfriend, and 17, 18, you know, somewhere like that. And they were really, I mean, very upset. And so much so that she was going to have to leave the house or come and see me. So they hadn't been here very long. I didn't know them that well. But the boyfriend and the girl and the parents came and sat beside me, and she was pretty coarse, put it that way. And the kid was scared spitless. He was also had been trying out to be a drummer on the worship team, and so he was, yeah. Anyway, so the parents went through a thing. They said they were afraid that the kids were going to be entering into a marital relationships sexually when they weren't married, and they were afraid they would. We could just see it. They would be off somewhere in a cornfield in a car doing that, and then jump out on the highway and drive home too fast and run into a truck and get killed, and they'd both go to hell. Mm. And I said, didn't you just tell me that they both had been baptized in the last few months and really had a connection with the Lord and stuff like that? And they said, yeah. I said, so you think they'd go to hell? And she said, you don't? And I said, no. I said, I'm figuring maybe they'd be somewhere up there, not far from David, who had a similar situation. They looked at me like, who are you, buddy? And I said, if they're genuinely forgiven and genuinely have given their heart to the Lord, should they have made that mistake? No, it was a poor choice. It's a bad choice and bad life decision to make. But he weighs what he's done bigger than what they've done. And they just absolutely, I'm going to start bawling. And they'd so lived under the law so hard that they didn't have any room for grace or mercy. And now I didn't paddle the kids. I said, use your head. You're not supposed to be doing this. And why would you do this? Disappoint your parents, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you can't think that what you do merits or measures up to what he's done. You just can't. That's not how it works. And David's I'm not selling that people go out do whatever they want to do. I'm saying, so I take that to the Lord, and the Lord says, showed me a couple of places in the Bible where Jesus is worshipped as Son of David.
Yeah.
Son of David. And I said, oh God, I want to know the God who has a guy like David that did what David did and got forgiven so thoroughly that when he hears Jesus worshipped as Son of David, he doesn't blush. Wow.
When that company finally went down, and I'd gone months not paying myself so I could pay my people and all kinds of stuff, and I finally came home one day and I said, it's done, baby. It's done. I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said, been sitting on something for you. She said, David committed adultery with Bathsheba. And they had a child, and that child was born very sick. And David prayed and fasted so violently that people were afraid to go around him for 7 days. They were afraid, literally afraid of him. And finally, the baby died. And David came out and washed himself and got something to eat. He said, we have a kingdom to run. But she said, people tell that story, but they don't tell the next one. The next one is that David married Bathsheba, and they had a second child.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that child is Solomon, which means peace. But the old prophet Nathan that had called David out always called the boy Jedediah, which means the blessings of God. She said, your baby died today. Go have peace and the blessings of God.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Man.
Talk about living on something for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're 43 years old. You have teenage children and a wife at home. You have $300,000 worth of debt, including 80 of it to the IRS. Boy, you need something to grab.
Yeah.
We came out of that, by the way, with that. We cleaned up the debt, no bankruptcy. And last time I looked, my credit rating's like 820 or something. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to borrow any money, but and that same David, by the way, this is my top 5 stories in the Bible. That same David, when he's got it all together, when he's gone through all the crap, his kids doing stuff, all kinds of wars, the king turning against him, obviously, early in his youth, all this different stuff. And when he finally was at peace with all his enemies, and he'd gathered all the funds to build the temple, the temple, and he'd done everything, and David sits down and says, "Is there one yet from the house of Saul that I might bless him?"
Yeah.
And you talk about the Spirit of God. Is is there one young couple that are pregnant right now that I might bless them?
Yeah.
I was on the street. We used to go to Mardi Gras every year and minister on the street. And I was on the street. I was on a corner in the French Quarter one night. That if I'd been going to film a movie about hell, that would have been a perfect set.
Yeah.
And a young couple appeared to me just out of the blue. And all of a sudden we're talking. I don't even remember what started the conversation. It's not like I handed him a track. It just all of a sudden we're talking. And he looks at me and says, "We're pregnant and we're not married. We don't know what to do." And I heard myself say, "Do you love her?" He said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And she's just, I mean, they're just obviously. I said, "Dude, you're going to be a father. She's going to be a mother. That's a blessing of God."
Hmm.
I had a Sunday school superintendent come to me one time on a Sunday morning before Sunday school in the basement of a church. Man I'd known for years, good brother. Looked like he warmed over death. And I said, "Man, what's going on?" And with all the shame he could muster, he said, "My teenage daughter's pregnant."
Hmm.
I heard myself say, "Wow, man, you're going to be a grandfather." I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're going to deny the fruit of God. Are we going to get caught in semantics when God decides to bless the world with another life?
Hmm.
Um, you've done an elegant job, as you always do with me, by the way. You have an absolute history, of 100% history of me, of always showing me a bigger God than I saw when I walked into the conversation.
Cool.
And once again, you've done that, man. And where can people find you? I mean, I know you're at Harmony Vineyard. You're pastoring there, and that's in North Kansas City, I-29 and North Oak. But are you online also? Are you doing some things out on the web that distant people could reach you?
I'm actually buying a little equipment. I'm going to start a podcast. Actually, I just decided to do that here in January, so I'm hoping to have it up and running by Easter. So,
Well, I'm doing this one, by the way, with a $350 Chromebook and $160 a year subscription to Google Meet. And a set of headphones. I don't know what I paid $30 or $40 for the headphones. Doesn't take a lot of equipment. And you can buy a little light thing if you want to put on your desk that are 50 or 75 bucks. But please do that. You know, you and I talked 20 years ago, and I said, I think to you, you really need to get some of this stuff out. And you said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about writing a book."
I did write one.
Good. Well, where can we find that?
Probably the easiest way to do it is just called church. I mean, get on Amazon, but I can do it for you a lot less money.
Yeah.
Do it that way. Sure.
So call Harmony Vineyard. What's the name of your book, bro?
Rhythm of a Captured Heart.
I said to you then, by the way, I said, "Who do you think will read your book?" You said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, you said it'll sell it in Christian bookstores." And I said, "So who do you think will read it?" And you said, "Well, probably a bunch of Christian housewives." And I said, "Is that who you're trying to reach?" I said, "What you need to do is blog." And I took my own advice, by the way. Unheard Words, which this will be on. It'll be on the podcast version of Unheard Words, without monetizing it. I'm not interested in making any money on it, without doing any marketing of it or anything. I looked the other day. I've had more than 600,000 page views.
Wow.
All over the world. I mean,
Wow.
all over the world. And I'm really glad to hear that you're going to start podcasting. And the minute you do, I want to promote it. I want to share it. I've got 3,500 or so friends on Facebook. Plus, I'm a member of a couple or several groups, actually. And let's use this conversation as a way of introducing you.
Great.
But yeah, go for it, man. I mean, you've got word, and
Well, I felt like I've proven to myself over the years that I can write, but I can't write and do my job. I just don't have the time to do it, or I don't have discipline. It's one of the two. So I figured if I'm doing podcasts, the Lord has defined me. I almost told you this when we started the session here, but He's told me 3 times that I'm a phraseologist.
yeah,
And so He'll give me phrases and stuff to use that He lands on. And so I figure I can do, like, I'm talking a chapter a day, a session.
well, yeah.
On purpose or not, whereas to get it written takes me forever. So
Creation is straining. Creation is standing on its tiptoes, waiting for the manifestation.
Yeah.
Of the sons of God, and this is a manifestation, man.
Yeah.
And you're perfect for. And by the way, you don't even have to schedule that podcast. Nobody expects this to happen. My podcast to happen every other day or once a week. Just when I get, it's epiphany driven, like the rest of my life. When I get something, I'll sit down and write 2 or 3 paragraphs on my blog, and if it works, if it flows, then I'll publish it.
Huh.
I've got more than 400 posts out there that I've written over the last few years. With the podcast, I don't know, I've got 20 or 30 podcasts now, all kinds of people never heard of, and Brian's on, and people like him, just all kinds of people. And now John Elgin Brown, which is going to add depth. This is recorded. I will put it out, and I'll also send you a link to it on YouTube. And
Okay.
you're absolutely welcome to share it. But people need to know you, brother, and you are a phraseologist, and they need to hear your phrases. I've been feeding on your phrases for as long as I've known you, brother.
I had a group I was in, international group of vineyard guys. I don't know how I got into it, but I was. And the guy that was running it was out of London, and there were people a couple from the States, a couple Canadians, a couple other, anyway. And I did it for about a year. All I did was chime in. I mean, I just came in, and the guy said, do you know, says, are you on Twitter? And I said, well, I said, yes and no. I don't ever tweet, but I follow a couple of people. And he said, I quote you 3 or 4 times a week, every time after we're done with the session. I thought you'd want to know that. And I said, shock the heck out of me. I didn't know. He said, no, you always, you say something, and it's what you say, but also sometimes the way it's phrased, placed there, that it's hard to forget. And I said, thanks, man. I mean, I was appreciative of that. And
I've quoted you at least hundreds of times, and expounded on things like the principle that I wrote a blog post on the DNA of God, for example. And I say that a lot. We need to understand who we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are at the most micro level. We're made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah.
And you're right. We just need to realize who we are.
I say all the time, He's a giver and a forgiver. I mean, that's really simple, but if you only can use like 5 words, that's pretty close. And consequently, then I need to be found to be a giver and a forgiver.
Brother, I've taken an hour and a half of your time, and I know you're much in demand, and
yeah,
man, I appreciate it a great deal.
No, this is fun. I appreciate you asking, man. I will get back in touch with you as I'm getting ready to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm technologically not very good, but I have. I'll say this, and we can go. I forgot about this. I have a granddaughter that just got her master's from KU, and while she was there, she had internships and that kind of stuff. And one of them was with a guy who does a podcast for NPR.
Wow.
And so she's done all the editing, typing, putting it on Spotify, all that kind of stuff. She's done everything but be a voice on the program. And she said, "I'll sit down and help you." And I said, "Okay." So and then I just had, I mean, this didn't happen for Christmas because of shipping things, but some people in the church, or guy in the church, found out that I was going to do this, and he bought me a computer because mine is ancient. I just always use my phone. And he said, "No, this would be great for that." And so, and it happens to be the same one that my granddaughter just bought. So she's going to sit down and school me.
You buy a Mac or a PC?
It's a PC.
Yeah.
It's got, well, we're hooked up where we got grandfathered into all the Microsoft stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this has got Copilot on it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work from and all that kind of stuff. So, and I had a laptop stolen from me about 10 years ago. And since then, I've just used my phone. I have an old computer I use at the house to print verses. That's it. I don't use it for anything else. Everything else is on my phone. And man, there are times it's just a lot easier to have a computer to work from because your screen have the buttons you need to push and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, very much easier. Absolutely.
So I'm going to get out of the Cro-Magnon era and get into something a little more doable.
The world's waiting to hear you, bro.
That's cool. I really appreciate it, Bob. I really do, because I think he's told me he wanted to use writing to broaden my swath, and I'm just not fast enough. And I actually think too, out of conversations and connections and that kind of stuff, I'll find out I do have something stirring in me to write as well.
Let me know how I can help you in any way. Okay.
You got it, man. I appreciate it, my friend.
Well, folks, we've had words today. My brother John Elgin Brown and I cover a lot of ground, and we could talk for days and not get it all covered. But we've hit a lot of highlights, and be inspired by this brother. He certainly inspires me, and hear what he has to say, because it contains truth based on humility. And be blessed, my brother.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. But you too, man.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. I'm done. Pretty good. Cameras dropped once. We had to do it.